We will call the July 14th, 2020 regular county board meeting to order at the historic courthouse. First order on the county board's agenda is Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, if you'd please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Number 2 on the county board's agenda is open forum. This is the point in the meeting where we take testimony or comments from the public on anything that is not on the county board's agenda today. Is there anybody, Therese, that's called in or on video that would like to speak to the county board?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no open forum. Number 3 on the agenda, review and approval of the June 23rd regular county board meeting minutes. Any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Franzen.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Franzine.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Barrows. I'm gonna, before I take that, I was gonna tell the county board, in reviewing what's happening where the public cannot come in here, I believe that we should be required to take a roll call vote on everything because the public cannot tell how the board is voting. Does that make sense? And if you saw some of the emails that have gone back and forth, I believe we need to take a roll call vote on every vote. So I will take a roll call vote on the approval of the June 23rd regular county board meeting minutes. Commissioner Barrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoag.
Yes.
Commissioner Franzine.
Yes.
Commissioner Brecken.
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Review and approval of today's agenda. Any additions or corrections, or not corrections, any additions, Mr. Hool?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Motion approved by Commissioner Barrows,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Franzine. Going to take a roll call on that. Commissioner Barrows,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That passes. Consent agenda. Any questions from the Commissioner Hoag?
Mr. Chair, 5.5, Tim, on the final payment for that Anderson contract for the shouldering, the original contract was like 92,000. I think the final payment was 75. What was the difference in those dollars on that?
Thank you for asking. Actually, included in your packet is an overrun and an underrun report, and that actually sheds some light on it. For maintenance shouldering, where we're shouldering, where we're filling in where there's low spots, it's very hard to it's very difficult to estimate that. Some areas it's flush and just fine, but just 10 feet down the road it might be this low. So we overestimated our quantities, and we paid less. So if you'll notice that the contract, and it's right there, it's difficult to estimate the quantity needed for shouldering maintenance for maintenance. And so we actually paid less than we thought.
Okay, good.
So,
Good, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, a couple questions for me. I don't see anybody here from the Sheriff's Department. I don't know if there's anybody on video, Therese.
There's not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so then I guess I'd direct this to Tim Hool. Joint Powers Agreement for Work Release Services. If I recall correctly, I think we, at some point here, last couple of years ago, we got rid of the work release program. Does this mean that we're going back into the work release business? Can you just go ahead?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. It's the work release program that the contract covers. I
Can you
think you're
turn the
thinking of the
volume up?
sentence to
Tim,
serve
can you-
program that got canceled.
Tim, can you talk louder or closer to your mic?
Okay,
There
Mr.
you
Chairman,
go.
I think it was the sentence to serve program that got canceled, not the work release program. We
Okay.
still have been engaged in the work release program all along. That's where inmates are allowed to leave the jail for the day to hold their jobs while they are serving out their sentence. Sentence to serve is the one that got eliminated, slightly different.
Correct. Okay, so then what money are we receiving from the state? And just in looking at a little bit, it's something not to exceed $100,000 and it was like $60 a day. What is that all about?
Mr. Chairman, it is to cover the costs of administering the program on behalf of the DOC, I believe. I don't have the figure off the top of my head of what amount we actually received from them, but I'd be happy to research and find out that number for you.
Okay. So if somebody has gotten a DWI and they might have to serve 4 months, and rather than having them sit there and maybe lose their job, they can go do their job, but they have to report back to jail after they're done, correct?
That is correct, and in fact, we also will do spot checks to make sure that they are at their jobs.
Okay, and so that's to cover that. All right, sounds good. Gary, how about just explaining the Fishtail Estates plat survey bond release? What's just kind of a short summary of that, if you don't mind? Or somebody. Jake, free?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is just simply a release of a bond that we require as part of our platting process. One of the requirements we have is that a stormwater management plan must be implemented as part of the plat. They have effectively implemented that stormwater management plan for formerly known as Fishtails, now residential resort conversion. And so our staff went out there to check it out, make sure the stormwater plan was effectively implemented. They felt that it was. We took some pictures, and at this point, we feel good about releasing the bond so that obligation is off the radar. I'll take any other questions if you have.
How much, what kind of amount of a bond do we require when we do something like this?
So our typical practice has been 1.25 times the amount of an estimation from a contractor or from the developer of what it would cost them or a contractor to implement the stormwater management plan. And then we'll take the bond 1.25 times that, and that's our typical practice. And then for some reason it doesn't get followed through on, we have that ability to use that if we need to make those improvements to protect our water.
Okay.
This was actually a very low bond amount. $500 is pretty low in this case.
Okay. So this is kind of in a way, kind of similar to the highway department when somebody puts in a new road approach and they're going to put in a culvert, and we hold some of their money until they've met our requirements in a way, Tim, right? Yes,
That is
no?
correct, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
okay.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jake. Removal of the tax forfeited parcel from Gull River Memorial Forest. Gary, can you just give an update on, or what this is all about? I guess I haven't been in any meeting to hear about this.
Yeah, so this is a parcel that was recognized as non-conservation. This also, in the past with previous land commissioner, a few land commissioners ago, the practice was to put a lot of the tax forfeited lands into memorial forest property for potential long-term protection to keep it in public interest, and that was the direction of the board and the land commissioner at that time. So now if we deem something non-conservation and the board acts to go ahead and dispose of the property, try to sell it, we also need to remove it from the memorial forest
Oh, okay,
classification if it's enrolled in one.
okay. Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the consent agenda? Motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Franzine,
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner Brecken. Chair will take the roll. Commissioner Brecken,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine.
Aye.
I vote aye. That motion passes. So number 6 on the county board agenda is our friends from the Minnesota Intercounty Association, and they're going to give us an update. Welcome. I wish you were up here golfing in our beautiful Brainerd Lakes area, but I guess it's different times. So, but we appreciate you here to give us an update on what happened this last legislative session and maybe the last special session, and I believe there's another one coming up of maybe kind of your thoughts on what's happening there. So I don't know who's going to start out, but go ahead and give us an update.
Well, this is Matt Mossman, Executive Director of MICA. Let me just pause and make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, speak up, just got to talk a little louder
Okay.
or something.
Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay. Well, let me keep trying to talk loud enough, and I'll see if I might have to get rid of these earbuds that I have in my ears if they're not picking up enough volume. Just let me know, and I can switch
Yeah,
to a
it's
different
kind
format.
of muffled. It's kind of muffled too.
All right. Give me 1 second here.
All right, let me just go to computer. Can you still hear me now?
Now we can hear you better.
Hear you.
Okay. Thank you. So Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Inter-County Association. I'm going to go through and just you will actually benefit hopefully from real-time updates. So as we sit here and speak, present to you this year, the legislature began its second special session yesterday at noon. The House Ways and Means Committee is meeting as we talk here, is meeting in St. Paul to take up what appears to be the final package or close to the final package headed towards hopefully completion of bonding bill, supplemental budget, tax issues, and some health and human service issues. Hopefully later in the week or early next week. So we'll touch base on that as we go through our presentation also. So let me start, and I've shared the screen. Hopefully the slides are up on screen, and as I scroll through them there, it looks like they're scrolling through in your meeting room. I do want to talk just a little bit about putting the whole session here in context, because it has changed the way we approached our work for you throughout the session on your behalf. And it certainly has been unprecedented, to say the least, at least in modern times, for everything that those of us who are alive and having this discussion, I think, probably have ever witnessed. February 11th of this year, the session began at a frenetic pace. It was headed towards kind of a typical second year of the biennium session, where bonding was the traditional focus, and it was the one priority that everyone, Democrat, Republican, House, Senate, Governor, seemed to all agree on needed to be done. There was at that time believed to be a small positive balance in the general fund budget, and we were hearing some reports of COVID-19 in foreign, far off, distant lands. Of course, it was already here in Minnesota at that point, but it hadn't really changed the dynamic of the session yet. Fast forward just a little bit from February 11th to week 9. During that week, a bipartisan agreement expedited Minnesota's first COVID-19 preparedness response bill that we'll touch on a little bit later, appropriated about $21 million in public health department money, and still legislative hearing agendas were full with sort of the original, what I'll call the original agenda of session, not quite impacted yet by the COVID-19 pandemic. March 13th, Governor Walz declares his first, the initial declaration of a peacetime emergency. The first executive order following that was the closure of temporary closure of schools. And the legislative leaders met over that weekend, and by March 16th, they announced a cancellation of all hearings, and that they themselves would meet by alternative means and on an on-call basis through April 14th. I know you know all that, that's been in the media, but at that point, our work for you and the work of the legislative session and really just the whole nature of the way public policy advocacy happens and the public policy process just really sort of changed in St. Paul to something that we've never had to sort through. And for the next several weeks, both policymakers and in St. Paul, lobbyists, the media, the public, and really all of you in county boards as well, and administrators tried to sort out sort of what by alternative meant, both for your operations as you tried to shut down and move people to remote workplaces, as well as the work that we were doing in St. Paul. The legislature then met intermittently through early May. The agenda moved entirely from the sort of original agenda to COVID related legislation. So, and also rather than sort of the boxing match that sometimes happens with legislation to get it over the finish line, there was also a new expectation put in place, which I think is really a positive statement upon Minnesota, that anything that moved to the House or Senate floor had to have pre-agreement of all 4 caucuses, the majority and minority caucuses in the House and Senate, and the governor. There was really no access just physically to the Capitol, and it was an unprecedented House and Senate voting procedures and protocols for hearings eventually emerged over time. The COVID stay-at-home order also meant that there were significant changes, at least for a period of time, for a good 6 weeks or so, in what we did here at MICA to try and help facilitate the work of your county and other counties in our association from March to April. And it just gives me an opportunity not only to appreciate your Administrator Houle, which does a fantastic job, I know, for all of you, but him and his entire team, I really got to know even better as I'm just finishing up a year in this role, but also all of your staff there in human resources, in financial management, and across the board. We operate a number of staff groups as part of the MICA organization that meet, most of them meet monthly. You can see them at the bottom of the screen there: administrators, fiscal officers, HR directors. During that period there, we facilitated some more frequent meetings for administrators, and I know your human resources directors in particular met more frequently, and the conversation really changed to action that was happening in Washington. How do we implement the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, FFCRA? The CARES Act came along, the governor's executive orders, planning for them and implementing them, and then really just also identifying the needs that county governments were going to have for urgent action from the legislature to support the continued activity and flexibilities needed by county governments in human service programs, in licensing and other things, and getting legislation passed down here in St. Paul in order to facilitate that. We, of course, also didn't lose sight of focus on advocacy. Legislative appropriations and grants to public health were a key part of that conversation. As I said, human service delivery flexibilities, Nancy will touch on. Ensuring that public meetings could continue remotely and in compliance with open meeting laws. There were a lot of temporary extensions related to driver's licenses, but also deadlines for and allowances for accepting electronic, faxed, and mailed applications for things like marriage licenses and other land use transaction documents in order to facilitate that. And one thing that happened where there was bipartisan compromise, there is a plethora of competing election law changes that the session started off with, all of which were headed towards sort of a clash conversation, but all sides really came together in the face of the virus to pass an election law provision for helping both get federal and state money out to counties, as well as some temporary flexibilities for this upcoming August and November elections in order to make sure county election officers can do their work there, and so that election can happen safely and securely. As May rolled around, as the May 18th adjournment date rolled around, the original, I call it quotes there, original session agenda really started to resurface with one significant addition that had come along. The Congress had passed the CARES Act. That was, as you recall, the $2.2 trillion relief package and pandemic response, much of which was the personal payroll protection funding, but also there was funding for a wide variety of federal programs in the health and human service area and public health, the FEMA funding, and then there was the creation of a $150 billion stabilization fund, of which $2.2 billion was allocated to Minnesota, 317 million of which was directly allocated by the federal government to Hennepin and Ramsey County. That became a significant piece then that Micah prioritized for making sure that the legislature engaged quickly and that we pressed for making sure that a portion of the 1.8 billion of the 2.2 that went directly to the state of Minnesota, that some of that got allocated out to the other 85 counties in the state to cover the COVID-related expenses that you are having, but also certainly bonding, supplemental budget, tax bill, and at that point, a big piece of the conversation, as Nancy will talk about, was also extensions of health and human service waiver flexibilities that were a piece of our agenda also. So the good news is, even though the regular session came to an end without any of those items getting over the finish line, the governor called a special session as he was required to do on June 12th, which started another special session that lasted a week through the following Friday. That special session yielded some progress on some smaller bills and some of the human service program flexibility, waiver flexibilities, but it did not get the CARES Act allocation over the finish line, or the bonding bill, or the supplemental budget, or taxes, and a number of other provisions that we had been following and advocating for. The good news is that there was actually a bipartisan agreement that had been forged between the House and the Senate on the CARES Act distribution of funds prior to that special session beginning. And the governor implemented that agreement almost to the letter of what the legislature. There's a few changes that we see as rather insignificant or actually beneficial, frankly, to our position. So the governor implemented that through executive action shortly after the first special session ended. So the essence of that agreement is, well, Micah had been advocating for 60% of $667 million be distributed. In the end of the day, what happened that really helped bring a compromise to that was that there was a consensus among legislators that the actual amount to be distributed to local governments was went up to 841.5 million, of which 55% was distributed to counties. So instead of 400 million, the 85 counties actually got 467.3 million, of which Crow Wing County has received, I believe already, $8.061 million for, and then at the bottom of the page, for necessary expenditures incurred between March 1 and December 30th that are due to COVID-19 and were unplanned expenses in the most recently adopted budget. These are all areas where we're working closely with the state agencies and with your counties, and Micah is working closely with the AMC also to ferret out what the details of those eligibilities are. But a real key item is that the last part there that I talked about, that what's covered by the adopted budget means either that an expense that you're incurring that can't lawfully be paid for from an existing line item, and the or is just super crucial here because this standard is really where most expenditures are going to fall, or the expenses that you're incurring are substantially different from what you were planned to use the funds for at the time you passed the budget. Cannot be used for replacing lost revenues. The final point I'll make, and then turn it over to Nancy, is that the state does expect as the special session was proceeding, there were a number of other programs that provide funding to counties that were being discussed, and the executive action is designed to assume that those other issues, costs that counties might be incurring, are expected to be covered by these funds, and that counties should not expect additional monies to be coming from the state for the local match. The local FEMA match for COVID-related expenses is expected to come from this allocation of money, as is any costs related to COVID workers' compensation costs or any COVID-related public health response costs, such as contact tracing and the like. So I'd pause there and see, well, or we can come back to questions later, however you want to handle it. I'm going to give Nancy a chance. I do want to come back and touch base at the end. I will, with sort of where that leaves the overall state budget, and we will fold in what is happening in St. Paul now. It looks like they are actually, I'll just say this for now, it looks like they are very much on a course of headed in the direction of completing a bonding bill, a supplemental budget and tax bill, and a variety of other bills that have some relevance to counties. So let me stop there.
Okay, I'm just gonna have you pause there for a second, just see if there's any questions from the county board. Nope, no questions, so go ahead, the next presenter.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Nancy Selewski here, and I do Public Health and Human Services for Micah, and pleasure to be here, although we indicated that we would rather be in person, of course. All things considered, considering COVID, it's been a pretty recent year related to services.
We're having trouble hearing you. We're having trouble hearing you, and we're getting kind of a feedback kind of thing, too.
And I apologize, my computer would not work today, and so I'm on my cell phone. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Sorry about that. So at the end of the regular session, the Health and Human Services Policy Bill was one of the bills that was left kind of hanging there. We were watching as the clock was ticking toward midnight and recognizing that it probably wasn't going to make it. It got hung up because of some concern from some legislators about putting into statute DHS authorities, and that included our waiver extensions, and so we were concerned about that. That was in an Article 9 of that bill, and there was talk about, hey, if that Article 9 is taken out, we can pass the rest of the bill. Well, it did not happen, so that was carried over into the into the first special session. They brought it up again during the first special session, took out Article 9, which again has that waiver language, and decided to do that in a separate bill, which we'll discuss here in a minute. But they did pass the HHS policy bill, and it did contain a couple of priorities that we were working on, including there's a pilot called the Birth to 8 Collaborative, which focuses on children during the first 8 years of their life in an effort to prevent gaps in services and to promote school readiness. That was included in that bill that was ultimately signed into law by Governor Walz. The other issue was the Yellow Line Jail Diversion Project, and I think you're all familiar with that. This is basically a situation where law enforcement brings somebody into the pre-booking site that may have been arrested or picked up for a mental health or a substance use issue. The model is that there's a social worker basically embedded at that pre-booking site, and with the permission of law enforcement, they develop a plan to get that person the treatment that they would need, and this allows for reimbursement as a Medicaid benefit. So that was also included in that bill that the governor has signed into law. Then moving on to the waiver extension issue, Matt talked a little bit about that. You know, due to COVID, as you are fully aware, we're doing business a lot differently, which is illustrated by the fact that we're on a Zoom call right now for a board meeting. So things have certainly changed. There was some concern that at the end of the emergency powers period, that the switch would just be flipped and counties would be forced to go back to doing the business the way that we had been doing. So we were very concerned about that. We worked with the legislature. AMC put together a blue ribbon committee to review all of the waivers that had been granted by DHS. That committee was comprised of 15 commissioners, 5 of which were MICA commissioners, and I'll just mention them. It was Commissioner Cascaden, Phoebe, Landcamer, Rogness, and Slawick. They basically, again, went through all of the waivers, looked at what works, what maybe doesn't work, and put together maybe 15 recommendations of extending these waivers. DHS then took that list and worked actually off of this county product. We started it, county started it. Also, the legislatures added some other items to it. And those waivers that, first of all, I should just back up and say all waivers are extended for a minimum of 60 days. That's when the emergency ends. But then we went on further and identified these 15 recommendations, and these are extended until June 30th of next year, which then puts the legislature in charge. I think you're all very much aware that there's some discussion about too much control in one branch of government. So this means the legislature will be able to review these waivers then next year when when the legislative session starts. I'll give you a flavor of what those waivers are. It's pretty much tele-everything. We are using this type of technology in the waiver programs, school-linked mental health services, targeted case management, healthcare, mental health, and substance use disorder settings. We're also using this type of technology. There was also some modification relating to licensing requirements for substance use disorder treatment and mental health centers. There's also language that partially waives the county costs when a person is deemed ready to be discharged from AMRTC or a CBHH hospital, as an example, but that they've contracted COVID, and so the delay in that discharge is related to COVID. We will see some relief on the 100% cost share that we normally have once that person is ready to be released. And then finally, I would mention there's something, it's a temporary absence. It allows for a person that is receiving housing support, and again, they contract COVID and need to be away from their home for a period of time. This allows for that temporary absence, and then again providing that the person has a place to return to once COVID is over, or once they've recovered from COVID. A couple of other things: there's flexibility for the oversight of personal care assistance services and home and community-based services, and also it allows for the use of telemedicine for patient assessments and consults relative to the medical cannabis program. So that was the waiver piece. I would just add that there were a couple outstanding waivers that we wanted to see get done. They related to child protection, and the legislature just didn't want to go in that direction at this point. There's one other waiver that they are considering right now in the second special session, and basically it would allow for remote interviews for MFIP application for MFIP applications. It does require an e-signature. A verbal attestation would not be allowed under this. And then finally, there is a rate increase for providers who care for low-income children in the CCAP program. And this brings us into compliance with the federal government. And these increased costs will be paid for by the federal government due to a surplus that's in the Child Care Development Block Grant Fund. Other items, public health, tobacco prevention. T21 was signed into law. This raises, of course, the age to age 21 and also expands the prevention of tobacco use in charter schools. Also, early in March, they developed or established a public health response contingency account, and $8.5 million went directly to local public health. Later in March, they put an additional $50 million into that account that goes to the Department of Health for public health response activities. And then an additional $150 million from the general fund went to the Health Care Response Fund. This also goes to the Commissioner of Health to make grants to eligible providers for costs relating to the preparation of an outbreak of COVID. They also, dollars can also be used to establish and operate temporary sites to provide testing services, provide treatment beds, or to quarantine affected individuals. What didn't happen, the governor's supplemental budget is an item that, is Matt mentioned, is going to be discussed today. It was in Ways and Means this morning. The things that they're discussing in the bill today, they're spending about $58 million, which was considerably less than what they were considering in both the regular and the first special session. I think that was around between 140 and 160. So they're looking at giving $500 grants or one-time funds to MFIP recipients, and also putting some money into direct care and treatment that has an operating deficit right now, and then PCA rate increases are the things that are related to HHS that are in the bill. Notice of missing is an issue that the governor had indicated he supported, and that was providing or reimbursing counties $8.8 million for the substance use disorder services provided in IMD, Institutions for Mental Disease facilities. That was something that was on our priority list. It is not in the bill that Ways and Means just passed this morning. I'm told that that's close to the deal that's been worked out, but there may be some additional tweaks. So we're still working on trying to get that funding. Another couple of things I would mention is retention grants for day training facilities. These are the facilities that folks that are disabled go to during the day. Many are in danger of closing their doors right now, and Senator Abler, Representative Cantrell have a bill that would provide retention grants for those facilities. The Senate passed that bill yesterday on the Senate floor. The House took it up again in Ways and Means this morning, so we expect to see that on the House floor rather quickly. Broadband is an issue that the Senate passed in both the regular and special session 1, and the House just didn't get to it. This is an agreed upon formula that everybody's signed off on, so it's been introduced again for this session, special session, and so we're hoping to see that happen. I would mention from a county standpoint, there's $2 million for new telemedicine equipment grants, and local public health and county boards are eligible for applying for those funds. There's also $15 million for distance learning and $10 million for the state's border. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of talk about issues at DHS that did not cross the finish line. I think we'll continue to have discussions about that. There was a bill that Micah was very much involved in that would have created a Human Services Transformation Commission. And this was basically, let's look at DHS from a transformational approach and try to redesign how the delivery of services is done. We've long, as you know, advocated for the simplification of complex programs. We'd like to see the use of data and data sharing improved. Want to look at other states' best practices, and finally bring in some advisors from both the private and non-private sectors to kind of look at the department. With that, we would be happy to answer questions. I do want to mention both Tim Charity and Kim we are very effective in our committees, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of how they represent not only Crow Wing County, but counties as a whole.
Okay, any questions of the county board? No questions, go ahead. Is there any more presenters?
Steve's here. I'm going to get Charlie.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you can see me. Can you hear me?
Not very good.
Can you hear me any better now?
A little bit better.
All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit more. We got a low battery situation we're trying to fix here.
Okay, go
All
ahead.
right. Let me deal directly with the transportation issues. About 95% of everything we're trying to do this year in transportation is wrapped up inside the bonding bill. And as has been said by others, the bonding bill is essentially agreed to, and under normal circumstances,
Now we lost you. Can't hear a thing.
okay.
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Not very good.
Try again.
How about now?
Not very good.
Hold it up close.
How about right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As I was saying, we have a unique situation with the bonding bill this year, which represents about 95% of what we're trying to accomplish in transportation. And the tragic irony is that the bill, I think, can be negotiated by the House and the Senate and almost was completed at the end of the regular session and the end of the special session. But the reason that it's not passing, it doesn't have anything to do with the bonding bill itself. At the end of the regular session, for whatever his reasons, the House Minority Leader decided that there'd be no bonding bill if the governor didn't volunteer to give up his executive authority. And of course, he wasn't willing to do that, and we ended the regular session without a bonding bill. During the special session number 1, as we all know, the intervening period of time between the regular session and special session 1, we had the unfortunate rioting in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding suburbs. And at the end of all of that, we had these significant calls for major police and correction reform. And now this time around, we had the urban interests as represented by different senators and representatives from Minneapolis and St. Paul now saying that, there'll be no bonding bill if we can't get significant police reform. And of course, as is the case with many issues, that's in the eye of the beholder. And that, at this point, has created a situation where the bonding bill has not passed. So let me put this in perspective and give my report from the back to the front. There may not be a bonding bill, and if that happens, it won't be because they couldn't negotiate one. It'll be because of these other political factors. And if that does occur, the following things will not happen. There will be no local road bonding money. In other words, no county road money. No local bridge bonding money. No money for the local road wetland replacement program, which is already essentially broke and would lead to the loss of the spring construction season next year. No Greater Minnesota Transit money, no port development money, no rail service development revenue, no bus rapid transit ways money in the metro area, and no airport money. So that's the bad news. The good news, which does exist, is that we do have significant agreement, and the gap between the House and the Senate bonding bills have narrowed considerably over this period of time. And I think the people that are actually doing the negotiating, the bonding chairs, essentially have the bill agreed to. So I think what would be best for me at this point is to go over the highlights, about a dozen highlights of issues that were part of our MICA platform, and let you know at this moment in time, with the most recent bill being the House Special Session 2, House File 3, which was introduced yesterday, and the most recent Senate position, to show you where we're sitting on the actual negotiation, which in private is probably already agreed to. But the point of the matter would be this. Once I give you these numbers and the differences between the House and the Senate, I think what you'll see is that any reasonable accommodation or compromise on these numbers would lead to a transportation funding bill that would be very significant as compared to the results we've got in the last decade or a decade and a half. So it's well worth working on. On the local road wetland mitigation issue, and I will occasionally mention the governor's recommendation, because in all the major categories of transportation, the governor's recommendations identically matched the MICA platform and tends to be the highest figure of the three columns. But anyway, on the local road wetland mitigation issue, the Senate is sitting at $18 million in bonds. The House is sitting at $15 million in bonds, but they have an additional $8 million in cash. On the local bridge program, the county bridge program, the recommendation of MICA was $112 million. That was the governor's recommendation. On the House side, they have put in $52.2 million for competitive local bridge money, and in addition to that, $55 million for the St. Paul Kellogg Street Bridge, for a total of $111 million in bridge money. The Senate has $25 million in competitive money and an additional $50 million for the Kellogg Avenue Bridge, which totals $75 million. So some reasonable compromise between those two columns would be a significant investment in local bridges, which would be very welcome. Going down the local road improvement program, where our recommendation was $100 million, that's what the governor recommended. On the House side, they have $52.2 million in general competitive local road money, but then in addition to that, they have roughly $38 million in special project money. So the combined total is about $85 million, which is a good number. On the Senate side, even though the overall size of their bonding bill started out about half the size of the House, when it comes to transportation funding and local road funding, the Senate has a strong position of $80 million in competitive local bridge money or local road money around the state. And in addition to that, they have at this moment in time about $25 million in individual project money, for a combined total of about $105 million, which is significant. And again, any reasonable compromise between those two positions would be a bill that we'd feel very good about. So I'm not going to mention some of the specific road projects around the state, but I will move on to a couple of other categories for your information. Township Road Improvement Program, that is a position of the Senate at $8 million. At this moment in time, the House does not have a position on that. Port development, the House has $14 million, the Senate has $3 million. Minnesota rail service improvement, the House has $6 million, the Senate has $3 million. Railroad warning signal replacements, the House has $5 million, the Senate has $1 million. And specifically in the Brainerd area, the House has $5.8 million for improvements to the Brainerd Lakes Airport. The Senate right now has no position on that. And the bill that the House introduced yesterday retained that $5.8 million for the Brainerd Lakes Airport. So that is in play. And the last two things I'll mention in terms of category is Greater Minnesota Transit. The House has $10 million. The last Senate position was $2 million. And the Transportation Economic Development Program, which only the Greater Minnesota counties are eligible for, $3 million in the House bill, $1.5 million in the Senate bill. So let me just start to conclude by saying that in the area of transportation policy bills, Because of COVID-19, there was an agreement that no bills would be considered unless all 4 caucus members agreed to it, which dramatically reduced the number of bills that were dealt with. And basically 3 policy bills passed. One was significant, having to do with the ability of the Highway 14 Coalition, in this case Nicollet to New Ulm Trunk Highway, to be eligible to apply for the Federal Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act money of 1998, where the path has basically been greased for them to get that money. And that takes many, many tens of millions of dollars off the sheets. That makes it possible for other highways around the state to compete, because this is a prime priority highway project. So that is good. That was done back in March. There was some modest legislation passed in the area of various types of driver's licenses for motor vehicles, also for replacement license plate fees, enhanced driver's licenses, and enhanced identification cards. The final thing I'll just mention is that transportation is one of the few areas that hasn't gotten any significant money from the federal government during this COVID-19 period. But as we speak, there's a major infrastructure bill in play, $1.5 trillion that has passed the House. And we also have U.S. Secretary of Transportation Elaine Choi, who has announced a $906 million investment to revitalize America's infrastructure. A significant component of that would be transportation, and a percentage of that would come to Minnesota. So with that, I will conclude, Mr. Chairman. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to Senator Novak? You know, I would just, the only thing I would say is just so we're all clear is, in order to pass a bonding bill, it takes 2/3 majority of both houses. So I believe the Republicans have a 1-vote majority. So in order to pass this, the Republicans and the Democrats have to work together, as they should, and to get this passed, because in the Senate, I believe it takes 45 votes. Is that correct, Senator Novak?
Almost correct. It's actually 60% that's needed to pass in both houses. And one of the ironies of the session is the Republican majority in the Senate needs 6 Democratic votes to get to 60%. But conversely, over in the House, the majority Democrats also need 6 Republican House votes to pass a bonding bill in the House. So both Houses' majority parties need 6 votes from the other side. So you are correct that this has to be a bipartisan effort. The point I'm trying to make is that what's unfortunate is that certain legislators from both parties in both houses have chosen to use the bonding bill as a bartering item for other non-related, although significant issues. One of them being the governor's executive authority, which the Republicans want reduced or eliminated. And on the Democratic side, because it's all Democratic members from Minneapolis and St. Paul, in response to the rioting and the urge of their constituents for police reform, which is in the eye of the beholder, of course. And those may turn out to be impossible issues to overcome. And if they continue to use the bonding bill as the bartering chip, that's what could lead to us not getting a bonding bill. And if that happens, there'll be dire results, which is what I led my report with, just so that you have it in perspective.
Yeah, and it's too bad that has to happen, because a bonding bill is a bill that puts Minnesotans to work, and it helps all of our communities, and to use that as a bargaining chip, I just think that's disgusting. But anyway.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. So any other presenters?
I'll move quickly. I'll take the presentation back, Commissioner and Chair. Thank you for. As I transition back, I would just add, to the question you had of Mr. Novak. I think in all cases it's a small number, I guess is what I would say, of members in either party that are sort of threatening, so to speak, on the bonding bill. So the good news is, and I think that this next chart here on public safety corrections is a good way to segue back to, there was some stuff early in session. You all know that you can have other disasters that can strike your area, natural disasters. And when we started the session, there was nothing in the disaster contingent account. That was a good action that happened this legislative session. Bipartisanly, that fund got $30 million added to it. There was some language that was approved in a policy bill that around the COVID-19 conversation about the potential for the state correction system that might be moving some individuals who were already within their last 90 days of incarceration and were preparing to be released, that they would potentially prepare for moving some of those individuals to community supervision in order to help with social distancing in the system, and or to county jails. And one of the real, I think, wins here for counties was that authorizing language was included in a policy bill, but unlike some conversations in past years, the language makes clear that it is based on terms that would need to be negotiated with the county. So that should be able to avoid any cost shifting to counties. Sorry for the blank dollar sign there, but the mystery dollar sign, I guess, is reflective of the mystery that we are still pressing for here in the closing days of the second special session, which is that we have been really pushing the legislature for more money for community supervision, Community Corrections Act, and county probation officer programs that happen in the communities. As most of you know, most of Minnesota's felons are actually supervised in the communities rather than incarcerated in the prison system, and local governments have not been getting any additional support from the state to offset those costs. And so there was money, bipartisan support for an increase for counties to do that. It unfortunately just came out of the bill in the House side as we were sitting here talking, and the bill was amended this morning as part of the $58 million supplemental budget package that Nancy was referring to. So that's not a done deal yet, but we'll continue following that throughout the session, the remaining days here, and keep pushing for it. So I just want to let you know, I want to leave you, unfortunately, I'll try to wrap this up in as positive a way as I can, but as you all, I think, know, the economy obviously is taking some significant hits with the pandemic, both to date and the reality that the pandemic is ongoing and potentially accelerating, if not here, at least other places in the country. And so an unprecedented thing that happened back in May was that the state actually revised its state budget projections. I don't think in my 40 years of watching this happen in working with the state that I've ever seen that done. And so in effect, we went from a 1.5 at the top of this page $1 billion positive forecast balance projected in the February state budget forecast to a $2.4 billion deficit. As of right now, the actions that the legislature has taken, and it appears that they are likely to take, will try and keep that deficit from getting any larger, but there's also not significant action being taken just yet to reduce what is projected to be a $2.4 billion deficit. You can see at the bottom of this page that in effect would mean that that's all yet to be resolved when they come back in 2021 to set another biennial budget. You can see at the bottom of the page that the good news, I guess if there is some, is that there is a small amount and a declining amount, but a small amount. It's 747 on the page here of federal stabilization funds. After they get done with legislation, it's probably going to be down closer to 500 million. That might be able to help offset some of that. And of course, there's roughly $2.4 billion in state one-time budget reserves that could also help address that situation if it doesn't get worse. My practiced opinion is that you should fully expect that when the November forecast and subsequently February of 2021 comes around, that it will actually be worse than this. And the final thing is that they did not actually revise numbers for fiscal year 22 and 23. So the numbers you see on the page there with the estimated $297 million shortfall, not including inflation, I'm sorry, that would include inflation, has not yet been adjusted to reflect an expected decline in revenues that is going to have happened here because of the pandemic and the economic impacts. So the long and short of it is, I know that you all are obviously taking preparations for your own budgets already, but we certainly face a situation in the next upcoming legislative session where counties are likely to be playing significant defense to minimize cuts or increases to state mandates, et cetera. So we will be prepared for that conversation. The final slide here just shows you, and I'll leave it for you to consume at your own leisure, but certainly that the expected declines in state revenues also hits pretty hard to some funds like the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund and Transit Assistance Fund, which goes both to Greater Minnesota and to the metro area, as well as some of the Parks and Trails, Arts and Cultural Heritage, and other funds that counties, local governments, or communities will frequently get grants from in order to support certain activities in your community. All of those funds are taking significant hits in their expected revenue forecasts going forward. With that, apologize if we took up too much of your time, but there's a lot going on. And of course, these special sessions have, just so that you all know, the reason these special sessions are happening is that state law requires, if the governor extends a peacetime emergency for 30 days at a time, which is the maximum time he can issue at each extension, he's required to call a special session in order to give the legislature a chance to reach a different decision. So at this point, on the 12th of every month, there would be an expectation, 12th or 13th, approximately that time frame, there would be an expectation that there would be another special session called if the governor continues as we go through the remainder of the year to extend the peacetime emergency 30 days at a time. So that's related to the pandemic, but it's also creating this circumstance where the can is getting kicked down the road a bit on some of these other issues, and we hope that the can does not get kicked down the road any further. We're hoping for some finishing up here on the bonding bill, supplemental, and tax.
Okay. That's the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the county board?
Nope.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
I'd like
Brecken.
that. Matt, what's it cost to call a special session?
Good question. I don't know. And historically, I would have, I worked for the House and the Senate together for about a dozen years, and I don't actually know how they're handling per diem and other sorts of things. The reality is that in this particular situation, there's probably fewer than half of the members that are actually traveling to St. Paul because of the unique conditions. So it may actually be less than in a typical situation where they would all be traveling to St. Paul. So I don't know the answer to that question at this time.
Any other
My
questions?
guess is less than it historically has, however, so we'll see.
Any other questions from the county board? Just one comment from me. I know that, you know, you listen to this and you think, oh my God, what a mess. Well, get 201 people together with 201 different opinions, very strong-minded people, I'm assuming, because people that run for office are strong-minded people, I think. They're not sheep. And so you get those down there and try to get them to agree to something. And the way our system is set up, it's the way the founders set it up, is it's a difficult process to try to pass something when you got to pass it through the Senate, you got to pass it through the House, then it finally goes to the governor, and he or she might not agree with it. So it's a difficult process. It's just like the county board here. We've got 5 members, 5 different opinions. Sometimes it goes one way, sometimes it goes the other way, but ultimately the work will get done. Probably not to the public's liking, but that's the way the process works. So we appreciate your presentation. We appreciate you looking out for Crow Wing County, and we look forward to you giving a presentation next time in person, because I think it makes it a lot better. But at least we got an update. With that, I guess there's nothing else on that. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Commissioner and Chair, and it's always good to see you in person also. I know we worked together when you were in the Senate, and I do want to just especially thank Commissioner Barrows and Franzen for their service on the MICA board, and all of you for your membership in MICA as well. So have a good day, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the county board agenda is extension, and Therese Norwood is the presenter.
Therese Norwood put it on the agenda. The presenter will, I think it was Brittany, right, that was presenting? Well, oh, look at her, she's already there. Okay, Brittany, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, my apologies. I was talking. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the county board, for having us on the agenda and for allowing us to join you through an online system. So appreciate that. Thank you also, Commissioner Barrows, that from the last Extension Committee meeting, you had suggested that we should have Brittany on to meet her as the new Master Gardener Program Coordinator, and for her to share a similar update to what she gave to the County Extension Committee. So appreciate that. I want to take just a moment to share that the Extension Office, currently the situation is all the staff are doing a combination of working at the office and working at home. We are responsive to county inquiries. County residents contact us and we respond either through email or telephone. There's many ways that we're responsive, and this time of the year is a busy time because, you know, gardens are growing and insects are out and farmers are farming. So a lot of the questions come in. Our office support specialist, Tracy Giza, she is the person who triages all those questions and then either refers them to a local resource, such as a Master Gardener coordinator or Master Gardener, or one of the staff, or she might connect with one of the university resources. In the way of an insect that needs to be identified, she would work with our state extension entomologists to get that identified and what to do about it, if anything. Or if it's an apple question for an apple tree, maybe that would go to the local Master Gardeners. So just want you to know that we're providing that value in that way. And what's important about that is that any information that we share, we're not trying to sell anything. So it's unbiased information and it's research-based. So that's the real important piece of the County Extension Office, that we're responsive one-to-one or noticing trends. If we've received quite a few calls, then we assemble some resources for, you know, the general public, either in a workshop or through the media, whatever that might be. So just wanted you to know that this is a good time to connect with Extension, as always, and there's lots of people doing that. So I want to introduce who I have with me. Brittany Georges is the new Master Gardener Coordinator. She's the program coordinator for the Crow Wing County Master Gardeners program. So she brings the program here and makes it happen. She has not just dipped her toe in, she has jumped in wholeheartedly. I also have with me Diane Grivey, who works on the state Master Gardener program. So Brittany, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Commissioner Barrows, for inviting me here today. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My internet is generally stellar, except for when I need it the most. So, but thank you for having me again. I'm really excited to be here and part of both Extension and the county. For those that don't know, the Master Gardener program is statewide, and our mission is county by county. Our mission is to use research-based horticulture knowledge and practices to deliver educational outreach and project-based efforts that inspire change and promote healthy people, communities, and a healthy planet. So quite the lofty goal. Crow Wing County, let's see. I'm trying to get my page to change here. There we go. Crow Wing County currently has 60 trained Master Gardener volunteers, 8 of which are interns. Interns in their first year complete their course with the University of Minnesota, and they're required to volunteer 50 hours in their community. Already established volunteers donate at least 25 hours of their time yearly, 5 of which are education. So I put this up here just because it kind of gives a snapshot of the big commitment that Master Gardeners have in their communities and the impact that they can have. And many of our volunteers, you know, spend a lot more time than that. So COVID has changed things for us, just like it has changed things for everybody. We are following the University of Minnesota's guidelines. So that really cut back on the in-person activity that we were able to do. We kind of have shifted and pivoted to more online and not in-person activity. But it's been interesting because at the same time as COVID hitting and due to COVID, there's been this big resurgence in interest in gardening and self-reliance and food security. So I feel that the Master Gardeners have still really been able to help Crow Wing County residents during this time. One kind of bullet point that I think really illustrates the interest that the community has in gardening and horticulture at this time is our Ask the Master Gardener column in the Brainerd Dispatch is usually a monthly column, and the editor asked our contributor to increase her column to a weekly column. One article in May had over 60,000 views on the Brainerd Dispatch website, which was over twice the next most popular article. So that kind of really illustrates the interest and the increased need for good, sound gardening advice at this time. We also, the Master Gardeners, volunteer to answer questions on the helpline. Any residents can call into this helpline number, and that had been kind of moved over to the Arboretum, but we moved it back over to the county. Suzanne discovered that there was still an active line at the county, so I just recently transitioned that over to back over to the county and worked with tech support to get that worked out so volunteers can answer the public's questions. We also have a pretty established group of speakers that present to the public, and maybe some of you have attended. We generally hold monthly presentations at the Brainerd Public Library right next door. We've since shifted to having those presentations online, and we had 88 attendees at our first presentation. So we're definitely increasing our reach with moving to an online format. I think typically there's 40 to 50 people at the library. So, and we actually have another one this afternoon on daylilies. So. I know one big project that the Master Gardeners do in the past was the Gardening 101 classes at the Northland Arboretum. And of course, due to COVID, we had to cancel the classes because, because of safety. But we were, scratching our heads wondering how can we still help the community if we're not able to hold classes? So we are developing educational materials on growing gardens to distribute. And we also established the Giving Gardens at that same location where Master Gardeners are maintaining vegetable gardens, and we have partnered with the Sharing Bread Soup Kitchen and the Salvation Army to donate all the produce. So we'll be tracking our production and reporting back on that. And of course, we're continuing with all the regular activity that we are able to do, and one big portion of that is maintaining educational gardens throughout the county. So looking ahead, kind of directly ahead, we're hoping to expand our online educational offerings and work on beefing up our social media presence, hopefully being able to interact with residents one-on-one and answer their plant questions live. While we're not able to hold gardening classes, we've been busy making improvements in the garden beds, so we're hopefully can resume classes again next year. We've also developed a Seed Saver library in partnership with the Brainerd Public Library. They reached out to us for help developing that program. And we have a lot of members very knowledgeable on shoreland restoration and water quality, so that will be a big focus going forward. And I have a few logos of different companies that we're partnering with, or corporations. And, we're always developing new ideas and new projects to work with the community. So that was my kind of brief presentation and overview of what we have going on with the Master Gardener Group in Crow Wing County. Thank you for your time, and do you have any questions I can answer?
Any questions from the county board? Commissioner Barrows.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that when I heard the presentation at the meeting earlier this year, I was impressed with the fact that what I thought was originally the position that Brittany had taken was to just coordinate the volunteers and that, but I think she's gone way beyond that and shown that there are opportunities, and regardless of what that position description said in the beginning, she hasn't limited herself to that. I think she's really enhanced the scope of what the Master Gardener program can do and support in our county. So I just want to say thank you to Brittany and to Suzanne and to Diane for everything that you folks have done out there. So that's my personal slap on the back for you folks. Thank you.
Any further
Thank you so
questions?
much. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
And Diane, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, wow, I just could not have had a better introduction than what you had just talked about with Brittany and the impact that she's had. So I'm Diane Grivey. I oversee the state program, and I work with coordinators around the state. And we can really see a difference in the groups that have that kind of support. From a metric standpoint, there are more volunteers, there are more collaborations, there's more community impact. And like Brittany was saying, they're just doing great work, including building those community collaborations with the Northland Arboretum, providing education to residents on really important county objectives like reducing yard waste, minimizing water runoff, minimizing pollution, and then working with groups like youth and vulnerable adults and seniors in providing them with education, teaching them how to grow their own food, and the healthy benefits that you get from eating your own food. So in general, I guess overall, Brittany has really made a significant impact, I think, to that position. And we're thrilled to have her and really grateful that she's here, especially during this COVID time. I think without the support of Brittany, the group would have probably kind of stepped back and kind of dealt with things in a status quo manner, but they've really stepped up and found ways to continue to engage with the community. So thank you so much for allowing us to hire Brittany. We're grateful to have her. And
Okay.
thanks. Are there any questions I can answer?
Any questions from the county board?
No.
No questions. Thanks for the update. Looks like it was just an update, even though it says a request for board action, it says no action required. So with that, we'll move on to number 8 on the agenda, the county board land services MC2 Investment LLC preliminary plat, Gateway Storage. Jake.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We have, as the chair just stated, MC2 Invest LLC. Applicant is Kevin McDonald. This is located, doesn't have a physical address, but parcel ID number is 683-00545, and it's in Ideal Township, Lot 5, Block 1. The request for you today is to consider a motion to, approve, table, or deny a preliminary plat of Gateway Storage consisting of 6 total lots, 5 non-residential lots to be used for individual commercial storage units only, and 1 common lot, a common interest community. And this is on a approximately 1.1 acre lot. If we have a chance, we could put up maybe that zoning map up on the screen. It's got the various colors. There we go, that's a good one. Just for reference, it's located along County Road 16. The transfer station, the Ideal transfer station is just to the south, a couple of 40s to the south, northwest of Island Lake. Oh, thank you. So this is the subject property here, 1.1 acres. It's zoned commercial 2, and as you can see surrounding, it's also zoned commercial 2. The properties to the northwest, somewhat removed from it, are zoned rural residential over here, and then Shoreland District to the southeast. And then what they're essentially proposing here is to create individual commercial storage units, and then put a plat over the top of them so they could be sold as individual lots of record to individual owners. And then the 6th lot would just be the common open area. This was heard at the June 18th Planning Commission meeting. They unanimously recommended approval to take it to the county board. There was no comments written of any kind from anybody or the highway department of any kind, so don't have a lot to share for feedback on this one. So again, looking for a motion to approve, table, or deny this preliminary plat.
Okay, so did you just say that the township weigh in on this?
My understanding is no, they did not, but I will make sure that's the case here. No comment received from Ideal Township.
Okay, all right. Anything, Commissioner Brecken, this is your district, anything from you?
No, I would move to support the recommendation of the Planning Committee.
Commissioner Brecken moves the request for board action on the MC2 Investment LLC preliminary plat, Gateway Storage. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Franzine. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, Chair will take the roll. Commissioner Brecken.
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag.
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. That passes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. County Sheriff, I see Heath sitting there. Heath, are you here to speak on behalf of the Sheriff's Department?
Not on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, but I know that I had an item on the agenda earlier.
Okay. So the sheriff is not here. Is he here by video, Therese?
He's not, Mr. Chair.
Not, okay. Okay, so Heath, I'm not gonna put you on the spot. I know that the sheriff's department has came forward with, I believe, proposing 8 or 9 new employees. You don't have to answer anything, but I guess that's gonna have to have an explanation, at least for me. I don't know if the other commissioners want an explanation, but in these times, and I thought I was under the impression that there was a consensus that this board does not want to have any new hires, but yet to still come forward with 8 or 9 new positions is just not acceptable to me. I suppose I'm going to have to drive the speed limit when I go home from now on after this. I just want to make it clear I'm not against law enforcement, but, you know, this stuff has to be explained to people that are paying the taxes for these positions and why we need these positions. So I don't mean to put you on the spot. You're the only one here from the Sheriff's Department. If you don't know the answer, I hope you will relay back to your boss that I'm going to be very critical of this moving forward.
I understand that, Mr. Chair. I can't speak to those individual positions that are being
Okay.
requested, but I will relay your concerns.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the job you're doing, so thanks for coming forward.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. County Attorney, Don Ryan, anything from you? I know I do have a question. We did get an email, the county board did get an email this morning from some enforcement action on Little Yukon, and I was just wondering if you could give us an update, or if you have an update on that, Don, or...
Well, that's an enforcement action that the board authorized a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. It's just north of Brainerd here, just south of Nisswa on 371, the Little Yukon area. We've been working with them for a number of years through my office on some enforcement issues, and we decided that we needed to start litigation. Brought it to the board, and we hired outside counsel to do that under the contract that I carry with Scott Anderson for consultation for the Land Services Department. It's been ongoing. It's currently toward the end of the discovery phase of the process. There's been several motions to the court. Scott's probably anticipating another year before it gets done. And without going into any of the details of the actual case and where we're at, 'cause that'd be attorney-client privilege, that's probably what I can tell you. You probably are shocked at the sticker price of the litigation, but litigation is expensive. That's why
Well, there
we
was a
try
little
to
bit of a
resolve.
shock already, so $20,000. So that's why I wanted kind of an
Yep.
explanation, yeah.
That would be my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Don, anything else to report to the county board?
I just thought I'd give you an update of where we're at with the Judicial Center. We have now started having some in-person appearances in criminal court. I saw some attorneys coming in that looked like they were coming for an in-person civil court proceeding today. I can't tell you what kind of proceeding it is. The juvenile court is gone somewhat more remote than they were, or not remote, but more virtual than they were. So they're having fewer actual physical people in court appearances, but some of those continue as well. The court administrator's office has submitted the plan to reopen the courts. So Alice Middendorf, our court administrator, had to submit a plan. It had to be approved at the district level and then the state level in order to reopen. And it's focused mostly on the safety of jurors. It's more of a jury trial plan than anything else. We're in the process of converting courtroom 1 into what I call our COVID-19 felony jury trial courtroom. With some modifications, we'll be able to hold jury trials in there with social distancing, with 14 jurors and all the participants at the same time. Still some things to work out on that, depending upon if anybody's interested in viewing the courts, because it is public, but the courts can't just put it out there like you guys put this out in the formats that you have, because this could be recorded by someone, and the courts prohibit recording of the trial process. And so we're looking at where can you do a closed network kind of deal, probably within the same building. just thought I'd give you an update on that and see if you had any questions. So all the courtrooms are ready, other than for adult felony jury trials.
Any questions of the county attorney?
Nope.
Don, thanks for the update.
Yeah, thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Okay. County Administrator, Mr. Hool, in isolation. Senior Management Team report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, yesterday there was a senior management team meeting and it was followed up on the senior management team meeting from last week. The primary topic of discussion was the Federal CARES Act, and as you just heard from Matt Mossman with Micah, Crow Wing County has received $8 million in Federal CARES Act funding to help to mitigate the effects of COVID in our community. We have that scheduled for next week for you to take up the topic at your committee of the whole meeting. And so there was a lively topic about, or discussion about, what are the possible uses for that? Obviously, I think economic development grants for those businesses who suffered. Obviously, I think reimbursement for Crow Wing County for the expenses that we have incurred. And we'll talk about whatever else you would like to have. And then a little bit of the discussion will need to be about what's the eligibility criteria that you would like to set. And we'll bring some suggested framework for you guys to consider, but at the end of the day, this is the board's decision about how these resources are going to be allocated and what the eligibility criteria will be for those who are eligible to receive it. So most of the discussion was around that. We also had a discussion about the 2021 CIP program, and I see three different ideas that are currently in circulation. The original submittal was a $4.3 million capital improvement plan. That's pretty much business as usual for what we submit each year. The second one is a seriously pared down version at $2.7 million, and that is, I think, from the perspective of the folks in fleet, facilities, and IT, their version of a bare minimum. I think there are many things in that plan that still we don't know will fail. And so in an effort to build fund balance, I'm still pushing for something more closely in the neighborhood of 1.5 million for a CIP. That way we could build hopefully about 3 million in fund balance, which we heard from the auditors at the last budget committee meeting is important for us to be doing right now. So we talked about that. There may not be agreement, as there has been the last number of years. And there are some pretty serious differences of opinion about what the wisdom of moving forward with that. And of course, there are risks associated with moving forward with that. And so I think that's going to need to be a lively discussion at the board level. You may not see a consensus. Of course, we'll try to reach a consensus, but you may have a different recommendation from different players on the SMT, as opposed to the recommendation I will put forward. I'm not sure how that's all going to pan out yet, but it's a process, and so we'll let that process run its course. And of course, at the end of the day, that's your decision. We also talked a little bit about the kinds of changes that we're making on campus. We'll be adding a few additional electronic entry locks to different doors so that we can contain movement within the facility, and also beginning a conversation with Debbie about how we're going to go about facilitating the elections that are coming up. We have the primary coming up, I think it's on August 11th, and then of course the general election in November. And we do expect that there will be larger volumes of people voting what used to be absentee, so coming to the courthouse to do their voting. So we're going to begin the discussion about how can we facilitate that in the best way possible. I'm happy to answer any questions about the senior management team meeting.
Any questions of the county administrator on the senior management team?
Nope.
No questions, Tim. You've got another couple items here. Reappointment of the Crow Wing County Assessor. Tim Hool.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there are three different offices that have appointed positions: the county highway engineer, the county veteran service officer, and the county assessor. They are 4-year appointments, which basically means one of them could be let go for cause, but once every 4 years, you have the opportunity to consider not reappointing somebody without cause. We did receive a letter from the Minnesota Department of Revenue that Gary Griffin, who is our appointed county assessor, his appointment will expire at the end of December, December 30th. And according to statute, you need to give him a minimum of 90-day notice, so October 1st, if it is your intention not to reappoint him. I haven't heard from any of you that you have any interest in not reappointing Gary, and so I put it forward for your consideration, Mr. Chair, to accomplish the appointment today or whenever you would deem appropriate.
Okay. Teresa, have we got I'm scrolling through here to get to my
Board action?
11.2, yeah. Can you just put that up there? I'm scrolling
Absolutely.
here. Thank you.
I would like to make the motion to reappoint Gary Griffin as the Land Services Supervisor, assigning authority and duties of the Crow Wing County Assessor for 4-year terms starting January 1st, 2021.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, second.
I think it needs to be Crow Wing County Assessor, not Land Services Supervisor.
Oh, okay.
Well, it does, the way it says it here is that you're the Land Service assigning authority and duties of the Crow Wing County Assessor. Is that right or wrong? I'm just reading it right off of the,
That would be Land Services Director.
okay, Director, let's get it right.
All right. Let's just look
How
at
do you want it written, Gary? Tell us.
The Land Service Director would be fine with the authority, that'll work.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the letter from the Minnesota Department of Revenue here. It says county, it's called county assessor.
Mr. Chair, that was, I had copied and pasted this from the last time when he was just the Land Services Supervisor. It was just an administrative error on my part. We'll change it to Director in the minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so everybody understand the motion that Commissioner Franzine, I think we're getting the result that we want. Was there a second?
I made the
Seconded by Commissioner Barrows. Any further discussion? Okay, Chair will take the roll. Commissioner Brecken.
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag. Commissioner Franzine.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay, 11.3 is resignation from Natural Resources Advisory Committee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
members of the board, Keith Seimer is the at-large representative to the Natural Resources Advisory Committee, and he has submitted his resignation. I believe that there is a suggestion in your packet for an appointment, but it is an at-large appointment, and so it's up to the county board to decide. If it's a district appointment, typically the commissioner from that district brings forward a recommendation. Because this is an at-large, I thought you might want to have a discussion about the process that you would like to use.
Right. And we don't have any recommendations now, do we? Or how
I
we're,
thought I saw one, but let me look.
did we post this to see if there was anybody that was interested, or did commissioners just go out and seek out people?
Mr. Chairman, in the email that is enclosed in your packet that Keith Seimer sent and announcing his resignation, he suggested Kurt Westerman, the DNR Forestry Area Forest Supervisor, to serve on the committee. And that was his recommendation. That's not something you need to follow. We could also post it if you wish. I'm not sure if Gary knows if there's a specific area that this person is supposed to represent. I think the Natural Resources Advisory Committee has different constituent groups that are supposed to be represented, so maybe Gary can help us if this one has that kind of a assignment.
Gary Griffin.
Yeah, I do not believe so. I believe this is a solely at-large. We do have 2 other members from the DNR that are on the committee already. Wade Miller is Parks and Trails, and I can't think of her name. She will be calling me because I can't think of her name. Also a forestry representative, but Keith was great. You know, he was on when he was working for the DNR. He was on when he retired from the DNR. but
Well, I think, I don't think we should, I think we should post this to see if there's anybody from the general public that's interested in this. I get concerned that we have it weighted one way, you know, that, oh, it's like all inside baseball. You know, what if there's somebody out in the public that says, hey, I would like to have a chance to serve my community on this? So I'm not going to make an appointment today. And so I guess I'd like to have that posted, if you could do that posted, unless the county board wants to go the other direction. I'd take a motion on that too, but otherwise, if you'd post it, and if we get some applicants, we can look at that, and then we can make the appointment at that time. Does that work?
Will do, Mr. Chairman.
Anything from the county board?
I agree
Okay.
with that.
Okay, you're not going to override me. So, anything else, Mr. Hool?
No, happy to answer any questions you have about my report or anything else related to county government.
Anything to Mr. Hool, County Board? Mr. Hool, I did talk to you that my appointee, Teresa Goebel on HRA, did submit her resignation by email to me. I do have an appointee, Richard Burton, agreed to serve on that committee, so I can give the name to Teresa and his phone number, and we can get him to the proper channels to get when he has to go to the meetings and any materials that he might need. But I believe this is not a chair appointment. This is a county board appointment, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And you know, another question I have, and well, he's from my district, but would it be on this HRA, I believe that it has to be specifically from your commissioner district if you're appointing somebody, correct?
I believe so as well.
Yeah. Teresa's shaking her head yes, and you are too, so, okay. Well, Richard Burton does live in my district, so I'm all in compliance. So, is there a motion to appoint Richard Burton to the HRA?
So moved.
Commissioner Franzine moves Richard Burton to serve on, to fulfill the term left by Teresa Goebel. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Barrows. Any discussion? Chair will take the roll. Commissioner Brecken.
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag.
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay, any additional business? I just wanted to say before we finish, Teresa, I want to publicly thank you for performing a juggling act as I sit over here and look at you trying to juggle all these people in and out and can't hear them and everything else. I mean, it's just, I don't know how you do it, but I want to just say on behalf of the county board, thanks for doing that. You're doing a great job. I mean, it's just kind of and anyway, I guess that's all. If there's nothing else, anything else from the county board? Okay. Okay, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Barrows.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Brecken. Take the roll. Commissioner to adjourn. Commissioner Brecken.
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag.
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned.